So we're going to continue on our unit in geometry in Math 1. And previously you learned how to find the midpoint. And some of your questions on the exam and on my test will be directly asking you for midpoint. Now, today we're going to start looking at distance. We're using the distance formula. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. There's not going to be a question on the exam that's going to say, use the distance formula to find, the length or between these 2 points. Instead, you're going to actually have to find distances of sides of different figures on a coordinate plane to determine perimeter, determine area, or the type of figure or something like that. So before we dive into those type of problems on a different day, we're just going to practice finding your distance formula. So your distance formula, you're going to be given 2 points. So in this case, I have x1, y1, x2, y2. Now, your distance formula, once you have your 2 points, is you basically take the square root and you're going to subtract the x's squared plus subtract the y's. Squared. Okay. Now, if you notice, I didn't necessarily put them in a particular order. It actually does not matter if you do x1 minus x2, or if you were to do x2 minus x1. It really doesn't matter, because once you square something, whether it was negative or positive, it's going to come out positive. So, and in reality, it doesn't matter if you subtract the y's first or subtract the x's. I usually just stick with the x's first, because it's the first number students are used to seeing, and it's the first one we use when we're doing midpoint, so I just kind of stay along with the same path. But basically, just subtract your x's in parentheses squared, plus subtract your y's in parentheses squared, all underneath the square root. Now, in Math 1, you used to have to actually simplify the radical once you had it. They no longer ask you for that in Math 1. So really, in all honesty, we just have to be able to find that distance. And these are only on the calculator active, so in reality most students just type the whole big old thing in their calculator. So we're going to go through real quick. If you need anything from the screen, go ahead and get it. I'm going to clear the screen and we're going to find some distances. Okay, so I'm just picking some random points. Let's say 7, -3, and 4, 1. That's supposed to be a 4. Okay, so we're going to go through and find our distance formula. So it's a square root, and we're going to go ahead and subtract our x's. So, and there's my x's. So in our parentheses, it doesn't matter which one's first. I'm just going to stick with whichever one's first and use that first. So 7 minus 4 squared plus, now I'm going to go ahead and do my y values, which would be here and here. So I'm going to do -3 minus 1 squared. And since it no longer asks you in Math 1 to simplify that radical, that's your fun job in Math 2. They just basically want the decimal approximation. So in your calculator, you want to do a square root. You have to hit the blue key and then the x squared button, which is on the left hand side, and a square root will pop up. And then just pretty much just like it is on the screen, you're going to do 7 minus 4 squared plus -3 minus 1 squared. And I get an actual nice answer this time. I get a +5. So pause the video a second, just kind of make sure you can plug that in your calculator, make sure you're getting 5. A lot of students make very common mistakes when they're going through and doing these. So pause the video, make sure you can get 5. If you're not getting 5, raise your hand, I'll come around and help you. Alright, so I'm going to pick some different numbers here. I'm going to say 7, -1, and -3, -5. Okay, and that is a 5. Alright, so again with our distance formula, we're going to go through, we're going to subtract our x's. So 7 minus -3 squared. And I know minus and negative becomes plus, but in reality, if you're just typing the whole thing in your calculator, just go through and just type it in. So 7 minus negative 3 squared. And we're going to do negative 1 minus negative 5 squared. And essentially, just type that big beautiful thing in your calculator. So we get 7 minus negative 3 squared plus negative 1 minus negative 5 squared. And I get a decimal approximation of about 10.77. Yeah, about 10.77. If you're not getting 10.77, raise your hand. I'll come around and help you, because it's usually something small that students do when they're trying to type this whole equation in there. A common mistake I often see is students will hit the right arrow key on accident and get outside of the radical or the square root, which will actually completely change your answer. Alright, so we'll go through and we'll do one more. Again, today we're just practicing finding distance, because in order to do the problems that they're actually going to ask you to do in Math 1, we need to be able to find our distance pretty much instantly. So that's all we're practicing today. I'm going to switch the screen. Alright, so one last one. Let's say negative 4, negative 1, negative 3, 9. Alright, so again, for our distance formula, we're going to subtract our x's. So negative 4 minus negative 3 squared plus negative 1 minus 9 squared. And we're just going to type that big thing in my calculator. So second square root, negative 4 minus negative 3 squared plus negative 1 minus 9 squared. I get 10.04. Okay. Alright. Well, technically that would, now that I look at that equation a little bit better, it actually rounds to, it's 10.049, so actually that'd be 0.05 if we were to round correctly. Sorry about that. Alright, so again, today's review is just going to be practicing the distance formula, so good luck.